raised Gaddafi basically since he was a baby, and they was very, very close, man. So Gaddafi was very hurt over this. And also we had a code where one of the outlaws, we was always trained that at least one of us, whenever we go out with Pop, at least one of us to keep a weapon with us. And Gaddafi, at the most of the time, he was the one that usually don't forget to bring a weapon. And even though they was in Vegas, they had weapons. But for some reason, as we know now, that this is the decree of God, that even the security guards that day, they all left their weapons in the hotel. And we know no matter how much security you have around you, when it's your time to die, then Allah's going to bring the decree forth. Nothing going to stop it. So Gaddafi, I remember at this time we went back to Jersey. And Gaddafi, I was very nervous of him. I was very worried about him. And he used to always say how he don't want to live anymore. He started to say, truly, I wanted to die. And I remember I got in trouble. And while I was locked up, I was in a cell. I think I was in there for a week. I started to think. I started to tell myself that I didn't come back to New Jersey for this. This is why I left New Jersey. As a matter of fact, let me go back. Because at this point, we all ain't care about our rap careers anymore. We all say there's no more outlaws. We're not going to rap anymore. Gaddafi turned back to selling drugs. Fatal turned back to selling drugs. I turned back to get in trouble. And eventually, when I got from getting locked up for that 1 week, I remember I got a call from Tupac mother. She said, I want y'all to come to Atlanta. I want y'all to get out of Jersey. So I went to Gaddafi and I said, as a matter of fact, let's just go back, let's go to Atlanta, let's get away from New Jersey, because New Jersey, especially North, is a very wild place. And he said, I'll meet you down there. He said, just go ahead, I'll come down there in a few weeks. And I think Pop got killed in September. Around October, I went back to Atlanta. And in November, I remember getting a phone call from the girl of Gaddafi. And she called and she said, Gaddafi just got shot. And this is 2 months later after Pop got shot. So she said, Gaddafi just got shot. And I said, what do you mean he just got shot? As a matter of fact, what are you talking about? I said, who shot him? And she said, Napoleon, your cousin shot him. Now for me, this was a big blow because right before I left, I introduced Gaddafi to my little cousin. So I said, what do you mean my cousin shot Gaddafi? I didn't believe her. So I called my little cousin up and I said, you know, I just got a phone call from Gaddafi girl and she said, you shot Gaddafi. And she said, as a matter of fact, you called. And it was the Mike Tyson fight again, and they gambled. And this is another reason why Allah says gambling is haram. Look what it could lead to. And my little cousin, she said, called Gaddafi and said, I'm coming to pick my money up from you. And she said, your little cousin knocked on the door. I opened the door. Gaddafi went out there. A few seconds later, I heard a gunshot. She said, when I opened the door, I seen Gaddafi on the floor, and your little cousin wasn't there no more. So when I told my cousin, at first he denied it, and then eventually he agreed that he did shoot Gaddafi. And this was another blow because we come from a society that if somebody do this to somebody close to you, the first thing you want is revenge. And the Outlaws, they was very hurt, man, because Castro, Idi Amin, Tupac, and Gaddafi, they all grew up since they was babies. And they was very hurt, and they couldn't believe that first it was Pop, now it's Gaddafi, and it was people from Tupac family and Gaddafi family that wanted revenge. And I was in the middle because no matter what, I'm not going to let nobody do nothing to my little cousin. So it came to like, it was a very awkward situation. I was living in a house with Tupac mother at this time, Gaddafi mother, who also I looked at this woman like a mother. She called Tupac mother, and her and Tupac mother, they was former Black Panther Party members together. They was very close. And she was telling Tupac mother, you sleeping in the house with the enemy's in the house. If you don't kick Napoleon out the house, his cousin killed my son, I will never speak to you again. And Pop mother said, I'm not going to kick him out of my house. And even to this day, Pop mother, Gaddafi mother, they stopped talking. Even to this day, if I see Gaddafi mother in traffic and wave at her, she'll roll the window up and keep rolling. So that's very hurtful because this is a woman I knew since I was 8 years old. And even though it's my little cousin that killed him, it ain't like I don't want that killed him. You know what I mean? So eventually my little cousin, he said it was a mistake. And my block and Gaddafi block basically was on the edge of war. And they said if they see anybody else, they're going to kill us. They said if they see my cousin, they're going to kill him. And my cousin, he didn't really have all the screws together. So he was saying, okay, if I see any of you, I'm going to do this and this and that. So I told him, I said, if it was a mistake, why don't you turn yourself in prison? When you turn yourself into prison, I think that really stopped a war from two blocks going together. So eventually, I moved back with the Outlaws, and we continued to do music. A couple months later, within that same year, I get another phone call from New Jersey that I had my brother, my oldest brother at this time, that he shot himself and committed suicide. So this all happened in the same year. First, it was my grandmother that passed away who raised me, and then it was Pop, then it was Gaddafi, and then it was my brother who killed himself. So this was the first time in my life that I really started to get worried and I started to wanting to know what was going to happen to me when I died. Because even though like I grew up, I didn't have no religion, but I never believed that a person can live life the way they want to live life do whatever they want, and when they drop dead, they sleep, and that's it. So I never believed that, and I started to really think and wonder. I wonder what's happening to Tupac. I wonder what's happening to Gaddafi while they're in their grave. So at this time of my life, I remember I started to pray to God, and I used to ask him, whatever your true religion is, guide me to your true religion. And after that, life went on. We put a record out called The Outlawz. We put our own record out that sold 1.5 million records. And at this time, money started to come and flow for me. And I started to forget about death. I started, at one point, I was able to buy 3 brand new houses. Every time a brand new car would come out, I'd go get a brand new car. And I was just doing stuff to show off. I don't know if anybody remember that the Lexus, for example, it was the first car that made the hardtop convertible. That if you press the button, the trunk opened. And I remember I wanted that car so bad, I went to the dealership with my brother, and they said you had to get on a waiting list. And he said, but you lucky, today the guy on the top, he fell off. If you want the car, it's a $72,000 car. I gave him a check, said, here go the car, drove off with the car. I went to a club, I waited till everybody to come out, and I pressed the button. And the trunk opened, the trunk opened, the top went in the trunk. And I felt like I was the man. Literally, I'm not joking, man. I was the only one in Los Angeles for a few weeks with this car. So everywhere I went, man, people just couldn't believe what I was driving. I'd go to the next club and I'd do it again. And eventually, man, I started to see the same car on the streets, the same car of mine was on the street. And for some reason, I started to hate this car of mine. For some reason, I started saying, I don't want this car no more, man. Other people got this car. As a matter of fact, it's a girl car, it's little, this and this and that. And I remember I started to do the same thing with my house. When I first bought my house, it was in a gated community. And about a year later, I was watching the television. They was promoting another house that they had on sale. So I went and I looked at this house, and this house was bigger than my house. And then, you know, when they sell a home, they show the model homes. This is the house they showed to sell the other houses. I remember looking at the model home, and I said, as a matter of fact, I want to buy this house. Every room in the house is furnished. I said, I want this house. They said, well, excuse me, sir, you can't buy this house until we sell the other house. I said, well, here go a check for $100,000. When you're ready, at least you see I gave you my check. Call me because I want this house. And eventually they called me, man. I remember walking in the house and I was saying that this is what I left New Jersey for. This is the ultimate success. I was very happy. But about a year later, I remember going on the balcony in my room, and I happened to just look over, and I started to look at the houses that was behind my house. And these houses was bigger than my house. And as a matter of fact, they had horses in their backyard. And for some reason, man, even though my house was a brand new house, it just looked ugly to me, man. I could never appreciate the blessings of Allah. And it wasn't until I became a Muslim, I knew what I was going through. Because we got narrations where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, the son of Adam is never grateful. He said the son of Adam will never be satisfied until the dirt of the earth fill his mouth. Basically, until he in his grave. And it's another narration where the Prophet ﷺ said, if you give the son of Adam one mountain to go, he will want 2. And I didn't know that this is what I was going through until Allah took all the blessings away from me, and I truly knew what I had. So I remember at this time, I started to ask myself, how come when I get a house, a year later, I don't want this house no more, or it looks ugly to me, or I'm just dissatisfied. And I started to say, man, it had to be something out there that could give me true happiness. Because most people might think, man, if I had 3 brand new houses, if I had a brand new car and I had money in my bank account, most people might think that this is the ultimate happiness, right? But if you realize that ultimate happiness is about having materialistic things, then how come you got, for example, millionaires that's committing suicide? You got millionaires that's committing suicide. So I didn't know this until I started to get this stuff that I said, this is not the ultimate happiness. And I started to want to know, how can I get happiness and feel happiness and peace on the inside? And I remember that this time I turned back to God and I used to pray to him and I used to say, man, I want to be happy in the inside. This money, none of this stuff is bringing happiness. Guide me to the true way of life. And I happened to be in a recording studio one day, and I remember one day I was very intoxicated. Like I said, I used to have a bad temper. And my little brother, some of the brothers met my little brother today, and I remember that I got into a fight with my little brother. And I tried to hurt him so bad to the point where I was banging his head literally like a metal. I was banging his head on the metal, and I hurt my little brother so bad that I busted his head up. He had to go to the hospital and get staples in his head to put his head back together. And I remember I was in the parking lot, I was punching car windows, and nobody would come and stop me. Nobody, none of the outlaws, they knew not to say nothing to me. And it happened to be a Muslim brother in the parking lot. He walked up to me, and he was very calm, and I thought that this man was crazy, because I'm saying I'm punching car windows. Who is this dude walking up to me? And he came up to me, he's like, what's going on? And he had a different demeanor, and he asked me, what's my name? I remember I said, my name is Mutah. He said, what do that mean? I said, it means to be obedient in Arabic. And he said, oh, is it a Muslim name? I said, yeah. He said, are you Muslim? I said, yeah. even though, like I said, my mother and father was Muslims, but at this time, the only thing I knew about Islam is that we had a book called